In the summer of 1946, in a hut in the Black Forest, the most difficult philosopher in Europe sat down with a Chinese scholar to translate a book that a child can read aloud in under an hour. 81 chapters, short ones. Some of them are 4 lines long. They worked all summer. When it ended, they had 8. Not 8 polished, with 73 in draft. 8. They agreed to resume the following summer. They never did. The pages have never been found. The philosopher was Martin Heidegger. He was 56 years old, and he had just been forbidden to teach. Over the next 30 years, he would write sentences that sound so much like that book that scholars are still arguing about how much of him came out of it. And he would almost never mention where he had been that summer. Here's the part nobody expects. It didn't stop because the Chinese was too hard. It didn't stop because Heidegger lost interest. It stopped because the man sitting across the table from him got frightened, not of Heidegger, of what Heidegger was doing to the text. I'm Andrew, and this is Daily Tao Wisdom, where we go back to the source. Not the quotes on Instagram, not the self-help repackaging, the actual stories, the actual figures, the actual wisdom, and what it means for your life right now. What this cost him is the part nobody tells. That's the part we're going to sit inside, because this is not a story about a philosopher who found ancient wisdom and was improved by it. It's a story about a man who understood one specific Taoist idea more deeply than almost any Westerner ever has, got it completely at the level of the bones, and then demonstrated in the same summer and for the rest of his life that understanding an idea and being able to do it are separated by a distance he never crossed. And the idea is about emptiness, what it's for, why leaving it alone is harder than it sounds. Freiburg, spring 1946. Start with the city, because the city explains the hut. Freiburg im Breisgau, spring 1946. The old town had been bombed in November 1944. 20 minutes, most of the medieval center gone, the cathedral improbably still standing in the middle of it. Now it is a year on, and the rubble is still being moved by hand. The city is in the French occupation zone. There is no coal to speak of. Food is rationed to numbers that a working adult cannot live on, and much of what people eat comes from what they can grow, barter, or walk into the countryside to find. This is where 2 men meet on a square called the Holzmarktplatz and agree to spend the summer on a Chinese book neither of their countries has any use for at that moment. The man who was not allowed to teach. Take Heidegger first, because you need the shape of his year. By 1946, he is the most influential philosopher in Europe, and he is professionally finished. Being and Time had made him famous in 1927, a book arguing that Western philosophy had spent 2,000 years asking what things are, and had forgotten to ask what it means for anything to be at all. Students came from across the continent. Whole traditions came out of him. Then 1933. He took the rectorship of Freiburg University under the new government. He joined the party in May of that year, and he remained a member until the state that issued the card ceased to exist. He resigned the rectorship after 10 months. He never resigned the rest. After the war, a denazification committee went through it. The result was a ban. He was not permitted to teach. That ban would hold for around 5 years. Understand what that means for a man like this. Heidegger did not think in books first. He thought in the seminar room, out loud, at the pace of a lecture, against the faces of people listening. Take that away, and you have removed the organ he thinks with. He spent part of that winter under medical care, and it is not seriously disputed that the collapse of his position had something to do with it. So, 56, silenced in a ruined city. And in the spring, he asks a Chinese scholar whether they might translate Lao Tzu together. The man who said yes. Paul Shih-yi Hsiao, Shih-yi, is a Chinese scholar living in Freiburg, and he is not a curious bystander. He has already translated the Tao Te Ching into Italian. He knows the text as a translator knows a text, which is a different kind of knowing from reading it. And his reason for agreeing is the thing I keep coming back to. By his own later account, he said yes because he was convinced that Lao Tzu's ideas had something to give the German people and the Western world generally after the catastrophe that had just ended. Sit with the position that puts him in. A Chinese man in occupied Germany in 1946, being asked by a philosopher with a party record to help him read a Chinese book. He could have refused, and no one would have questioned it. He said yes because he thought the book might be medicine. They arranged to work at Heidegger's hut at Todtnauberg, up in the Black Forest above the town. One room, wood, no comforts, the place where most of his real thinking had always happened. 2 men, 1 table, 81 chapters, a whole summer. They got 8. Of the 8 they finished, chapter 15 is the one that mattered, and we know exactly what happened to it, because Hsiao wrote it down 30 years later in a memoir of his time with Heidegger. Chapter 15 describes the old masters. It says they were careful, watchful, yielding, hard to read from outside. And in the middle of it are 2 lines that Hsiao renders, word for word, like this. Who can, settling the muddy, gradually make it clear? Who can, stirring the tranquil, gradually bring it to life? Look at what those lines actually are. They are 2 questions with no answers attached, describing 2 movements in opposite directions. Stillness clarifies what was muddy. Movement wakes what had gone still. And the text does not tell you which one you need, or when, or how. It asks. Heidegger did not leave them as questions. Hsiao's account is that Heidegger pressed further into them and came out with something else. That the clearing up is a bringing of something to light, and that the barely perceptible motion inside the stillness is a bringing of something into being. Now, you have to hear what has just happened because it's subtle and it's the whole video. Nothing in that is a mistranslation. There is no word Heidegger got wrong. Everything he says is arguably in there, and any decent translator would tell you that some interpretation is unavoidable. You cannot move a line from classical Chinese into German without deciding things. But the Chinese lines are 2 questions about mud and water. What comes out the other end is light and being, which happen to be the 2 words at the dead center of everything Martin Heidegger had written since 1927. The lines came in as a question, they went out as his own vocabulary, and then he asked Hsiao to write them out for him in calligraphy. Hsiao did, 8 characters, 2 lines, on the best parchment available in Germany in 1946, which cannot have been very good, and then, of his own accord, he added a phrase that is not in chapter 15 at all, as decoration, the Tao of Heaven. Both of them in the same small act, adding something that wasn't there, one in the philosophy, one in the margin. Only one of them noticed. Chapter 2. The sentence Hsiao wrote about himself. 30 years later, describing all this, Hsiao wrote a sentence about his own practice that I would put on the wall of every room where anybody translates anything. He said that in his own Italian version of Lao Tzu, he had never dared to go beyond what stood textually in front of him, and that such daring had never even occurred to him. Never even occurred to him. Not a rule he obeyed with difficulty, a move that was not in his repertoire. That is not modesty, and it is not timidity, and it is not a lesser kind of thinking. It's a discipline, and it's the harder one, and the reason it's harder is that the text does not stop you. Chapter 15 will sit there and let you do anything you like to it. It will not object. There is no force in the room resisting the addition except the translator's own willingness to leave a hole open. And here is why these two men could not have worked together for long. Heidegger genuinely believed that this kind of pushing past was what thinking is. He did it to Aristotle. He did it to Kant, to Nietzsche, to Hölderlin, to the pre-Socratics. That's not a hostile reading of him. It's his method, and it's why he matters. He was not trying to report what a text said. He believed the important thing in a text was the part it hadn't managed to say, and the job was to say it. That is a defensible philosophy. On the Tao Te Ching, it is a catastrophe, because this is the one book in the world whose unsaid part is not a deficiency to be completed. It's the mechanism. The gaps are load-bearing. A translator who fills them has not finished the job. He has broken the thing while explaining it. Two things were true at once, and he could only see one of them. Which brings us to the chapter Heidegger came back to for the rest of his life, and to the joke at the center of this story. Chapter 11. It is 8 lines, and it has 3 examples in it. 30 spokes meet at a hub, and it is the hollow at the center, where there is nothing, that makes the wheel a wheel. Clay is worked into a vessel, and it is the empty space inside that makes it a vessel. Doors and windows are cut into a room, and it is the emptiness they open that makes the room somewhere you can live. Then the line that ties it. What is there gives you the thing. What is not there is what the thing is for. This is Taoism's most practical single idea, and almost nobody takes it literally enough. It is not a metaphor about spaciousness. It is an argument about function. The useful part of every object in that list is the part nobody made. Nobody built the hole in the hub. The potter did not manufacture the space in the jar. He built a wall around it, and the space is what the buyer paid for. Every made thing in your house works because of a nothing that the maker had the sense to leave alone. Heidegger read that chapter and got it, and I mean got it at a level that puts most commentators to shame. Working from the German versions available to him, he produced a rendering of the closing line that is unmistakably his. The non-being grants being. It is a beautiful sentence, and it is again not quite what the text said. Lao Tzu is talking about wheels and pots. He is being deliberately, almost comically, concrete. The whole rhetorical force of chapter 11 is that it refuses to get metaphysical. It just points at 3 objects on the floor and says, look. Heidegger takes the pots away and hands you an ontology. He also, a few years later, wrote an essay about a jug, about how the jug's holding is done by the void and how the potter shapes clay around an emptiness. He does not mention chapter 11 in it. And this is where you get to decide what you think, because scholars have been fighting about it for 40 years, and there is no settled answer. One camp says the parallels between the late Heidegger and Taoism are so specific that a real debt is being concealed. Another says he arrived at the same country from the West, on his own road, and that the resemblance is what happens when two people describe the same thing accurately. There is a whole shelf of serious books on this, and they do not agree. I'm not going to hand you a verdict on it, partly because I don't have one, and partly because the more interesting failure isn't the sourcing. It's this. The man understood, better than his critics, better than most translators, that the empty part of a thing is the working part. He wrote it down. He believed it. He built a late philosophy that circles it constantly. And when he sat in front of 8 blank lines of classical Chinese, he filled them. So the summer ends. They have chapters 1, 15, 18, 25, 32, 37, 40, and 41. Roughly a tenth of the book. They agree to pick it up next summer. Nothing happens. Not that summer, not any summer. And there are 3 explanations on the record, and they don't agree. And I'm going to give you all 3, because the disagreement is more honest than any one of them. The tidy version, and the one you'll find in most short accounts. Hsiao got busy. He was in demand as a lecturer on Asian thought across Germany. He traveled, and the thing simply lapsed the way collaborations lapse. Heidegger's version, or rather versions, because he gave different ones at different times. Sometimes he said the problem was difficulties with his collaborator. Sometimes he said the problem was that classical Chinese was too foreign to get into German at all. And then there is what Hsiao himself finally reported decades later, and it is the scene that made me want to make this video. It's the 1960s. A friend of Hsiao's has brought him along on a visit to Heidegger, and the friend mentions Lao Tzu. And Heidegger, a little animated but smiling, points across the room at Hsiao and says, in effect, but he's the one who didn't want to go on. And Hsiao, writing it down years later, says he smiled back and that he felt ashamed. Take that apart because there's a lot in a very small moment. First, it settles the question. Heidegger wanted to continue. Hsiao stopped it, and Hsiao's own account confirms it rather than denying it. The tidy version about the lecture circuit is not wrong, exactly. It is just the polite surface of something else. Second, the shame. What is a man ashamed of 30 years on when he has just been named in public as the one who walked away? Not laziness. You don't carry laziness for 3 decades. Shame that specific belongs to a decision you still think was right and could never justify out loud. He had been handed the most famous thinker in Europe and a chance to put Lao Tzu into German with him, and he backed out, and he could not say the reason in a room, and he could not stop knowing it either. We do not have Hsiao's stated reason. That's the honest position, and I'm not going to invent one for him. What we have is his sentence about never daring to go past the text, and we have his shame sitting a few pages apart in the same memoir, and each of us can put them together or not. What I think, and I'll flag it clearly as what I think, not what the record says, is that Hsiao worked out what was going to happen. Not that Heidegger was stealing, that he was building, that the finished thing would be magnificent and would carry both their names and would not be the Tao Te Ching, and that the 73 chapters they hadn't reached yet were safer unwritten than written that way. If that's right, then the most Taoist act in this entire story was performed by the man who has no chapter about him in anybody's philosophy. He was asked to help fill 81 spaces. He filled 8. understood what filling was costing, and left the rest empty. One more thing about Heidegger, because it complicates him in the direction of respect. When his complete works were planned, he chose a motto for the whole edition, not a summary of his findings. 4 words: Ways, not works. Wege, nicht Werke. That is a remarkable thing for a man to put on 100 volumes. It says, don't take these as results. Take them as paths that were walked. Several of his book titles are about paths in a forest, about tracks and markers rather than conclusions. And the Chinese character at the center of the book he failed to translate, Tao, is, in its ordinary everyday sense, a road, a way. Heidegger knew that and said so late in life, that the word we translate with our biggest metaphysical vocabulary is, underneath, a word about a way through. So he did not miss it. He arrived at way, not works by himself or with help, and he arrived at it correctly, which leaves the last question of the night, and it's uncomfortable. He was rector in 1933. He held the card until 1945. After the war, he gave interviews, gave explanations, gave a long account to a magazine on the condition it not be published until he was dead. And he never gave a clear public reckoning for it. Not to the students who did not come back. Not to Paul Celan, the Jewish poet whose parents were murdered in the camps, who came up to that hut in 1967 and wrote a line in the guest book about a hope for a word from a thinker and went away without it. Celan wrote a poem about the visit, read it, and you can feel a man waiting for a sentence that does not arrive. And here is where the video's own idea turns around and bites. Because you could defend that silence in Taoist terms. Say nothing. Don't perform. The one who explains himself is not believed. There's a version of Heidegger's refusal that looks like restraint. It isn't. And the difference is the whole distinction this channel exists to make. The emptiness in chapter 11 is functional. The hole in the wheel is doing something. It's the part that turns. The silence Heidegger kept was not doing anything. It was a wall he stood behind, and the proof is that it cost him nothing and gave nothing to anyone else. 2 silences that sound identical from outside. One holds a space open so something can move through it. The other is a door held shut. You cannot tell them apart by listening. You can only tell them apart by asking who the quiet is serving. He filled every gap in a book about leaving gaps alone and kept the one silence that would actually have cost him something to break. You cannot leave a gap open. That's it. That's the modern condition in one sentence. And you have proved it 4 times today already. A pause opens in a conversation and you fill it. A colleague finishes a sentence that didn't quite land, and you jump in and finish it better. You send the message, then send the second message explaining the first. 90 seconds of nothing in a queue, and your hand is already moving. There is a gap between what you meant and what you said, and instead of letting it sit there and be productive, you close it with more words. None of that is a character flaw. It's trained. Every system you interact with is built to punish the unfilled space. Dead air, unread, incomplete, still typing. And the thing you lose is precisely the thing Lao Tzu says is the point. The space nobody built is the part that works. So the practice isn't emptying your mind, which is a wellness product. It's much narrower and much harder. Notice a gap, leave it. 3 ways today. 1. Count to 3 before you answer. Next conversation that matters. 1. Not all of them. When the other person stops talking, count 3 full seconds before you say anything. That's it. It will feel absurd. 3 seconds of silence between 2 people, is long enough to be noticeable and short enough that nobody thinks something's wrong. Two things happen, and both are useful. Some of the time, they keep talking. And the second thing they say is almost always the real one, because the first thing was the version they had ready. You have not been having a conversation with them for years. You've been having it with their prepared remarks because you kept closing the gap before the real sentence could get out. The rest of the time, nothing happens, and you answer 3 seconds later. Notice what your answer is like. Mine is shorter. 2. Cut the sentence that explains the sentence. Find something you wrote today. Email, message, anything with a paragraph in it. Find the sentence whose only job is to make sure the previous sentence was understood correctly. It's usually near the end. It often starts with basically, or what I mean is, or just to be clear, it restates what you already said, with the ambiguity sanded off. Delete it. Send it without. Then sit with what you feel, because that feeling is the entire lesson. There's a distinct discomfort in letting something go out with a gap in it, and the discomfort is not about clarity. You were clear the first time. It's about control. That closing sentence isn't there to help the reader understand. It's there so the reader can't understand it any other way, and what you lose by cutting it is not precision. It's the guarantee. Heidegger could not send chapter 15 out as 2 questions about mud. He had to add the line about light and being, and the line is beautiful, and it closed the door. 3. Carry 1 question all week without answering it. Pick a real one, something actually open in your life. Should I stay? Is this working? Do I still want this? Now do not answer it for 7 days. Not avoid it, carry it. Let it be in the room. When your mind offers you a conclusion, and it will quickly because an unanswered question is intolerable and the brain will produce almost anything to close one. Notice the offer, notice the relief that comes with it, and set it down again. This is the hardest of the 3 and you'll fail at it. And that's fine. And here's why it's worth doing anyway. The answers your mind hands you in the first 48 hours are not answers. They're gap closers. They arrive because the open question is uncomfortable, not because anything has been resolved. A question you can hold for a week starts telling you things a question you closed on Tuesday never will. Chapter 15 is 2 questions. Nobody has ever answered them, and they've been working on people for 2,000 years. A confession, since I'm asking. Every video on this channel ends with me handing you a formulation, a neat one. That's the job, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But I noticed, making this, that I do, to these texts, almost exactly what Heidegger did. I take a chapter that asks a question, and I hand you an argument. I close it, on camera, every week, because an unresolved ending performs badly, and I know it. The 2 lines about muddy water don't need my sentence after them. They've been fine without me since before Rome. I add it anyway, and I'm going to keep adding it, and the least I can do is tell you it's happening. If this is what you come here for, the actual documents, the actual rooms, the stories that don't resolve into a poster, subscribe. This is what we do every week. And in the comments, this one specifically, quote me your closing sentence. The one you always add. The what I mean is, the does that make sense? The little clause you tack on so nobody can take it wrong. Find a real one from something you sent this week and put it in the comments word for word. I want to see what they look like next to each other. My guess is they're more alike than any of us would like. Return to the hut. Go back up to Todtnauberg, the summer of 1946. 1 room, a table, 2 men, 81 chapters in front of them, and a ruined country at the bottom of the hill. We can see the room differently now, because the thing that came out of that summer was not 8 translated chapters. Those are lost. No one has ever found the pages, and it's possible they no longer exist. What came out of it was 73 chapters that did not get translated, and that is not a failure of the project. Looked at from the inside of the book they were working on, it may be the most successful thing either of them did that year. The wheel turns on the hole in the hub. The room is useful because of the part that isn't wall. And the Tao Te Ching survived its encounter with the most powerful interpretive mind in Europe because a translator nobody has heard of stopped filling it in, felt bad about that for 30 years, and stopped anyway. Heidegger got the idea completely. Hsiao did the thing. So, here's the question I can't close, and I've genuinely tried all week. We admire the ones who fill. That's what mastery looks like from outside. The person with the answer, the one who takes the ambiguous thing and makes it definite, the sentence that finally nails it. Every reward you've ever been given at school or at work came from closing a gap faster than the person next to you. And the man in this story who understood emptiness best is the one who could not leave any. So, which are you being paid for? And is it the same thing you're actually good at? I don't know how you'd tell. Heidegger couldn't, and he thought harder about this specific question than anyone in the 20th century. Which is why the only thing I'd stand behind is the smallest one. This week, once, someone stops talking and you count to 3. That's it. That's the whole practice. 3 seconds of a thing nobody built, doing the work. Take the long way home.